Sinister stories.
Margaret Simms had always enjoyed the quiet of her suburban home. Nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, the house was her sanctuary, a place where she could retreat from the bustling chaos of her day job as a legal secretary. But lately, her sanctuary had turned into a prison, one haunted by a relentless sound that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. It started innocently enough one night as she lay in bed reading a book. A soft, rhythmic dripping noise seemed to emanate from somewhere in the house. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just the pipes settling or perhaps rain tapping against a window. But the sound persisted, its steady cadence burrowing into her mind. Drip, drip, drip. Margaret put down her book and got out of bed, the wooden floor cold under her bare feet. She followed the sound down the hallway, checking each room as she went. The bathroom was dry, the kitchen sink off, and the laundry room quiet. Frustrated, she returned to bed, convincing herself it was just her imagination. But the next night, it returned. Drip, drip, drip. This time, she was determined to find the source. She scoured every inch of the house, but there was no leaky faucet, no puddle, no telltale sign of water damage. The sound seemed to mock her, its origin an inscrutable mystery. As days turned into weeks, the dripping noise became a constant presence in her life. It followed her from room to room, sometimes growing louder, other times fading into a barely perceptible whisper. It disrupted her sleep, invaded her dreams, and gnawed at her sanity. Drip, drip, drip. Her friends and colleagues noticed the change in her. She became withdrawn, distracted, her once sharp mind dulled by exhaustion and anxiety. She tried to explain the noise to them, but they dismissed it as stress or suggested she call a plumber. She did, but the plumber found nothing amiss. The pipes were in good condition and there were no leaks to be found. Margaret's frustration turned to desperation. She started tearing up floorboards, peeling back wallpaper, and dismantling furniture, convinced that the source of the dripping was hidden somewhere in the house. But all she uncovered were dusty corners and cobwebs. One night, as she lay in bed, the sound grew louder than ever before, each drip like a hammer striking her skull. She covered her ears with her hands, trying to block it out, but it was no use. The noise was inside her head, echoing through her thoughts. Drip, drip, drip. She couldn't take it anymore. She jumped out of bed and ran through the house, her eyes wild with fear and fury. She screamed at the walls, demanding the noise to stop, but it only grew louder. In a frenzy, she grabbed a hammer and began smashing holes in the walls, hoping to find the elusive source. As she swung the hammer, she noticed something strange. One of the walls seemed damp, the paint bubbling and peeling away. Her heart raced as she tore at the plaster, revealing a patch of dark, wet wood beneath. Could this be it? Had she finally found the source? She ripped away more of the wall, exposing a hidden cavity. The air inside was damp and musty, and as she peered into the darkness, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, nestled within the wall, was a small, rusted pipe, its surface slick with water. But that wasn't all. Beside the pipe was a decayed skeletal hand, its bony fingers reaching out as if in silent plea. Margaret stumbled back, her mind reeling. How long had that body been there? Who was it? And why had she never noticed the smell of decay before? The questions swirled in her mind, but one thing was clear. The dripping noise was coming from the pipe, the water seeping out through a tiny crack. She called the police, and they arrived within minutes, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The officers cordoned off the area and began their investigation, their faces grim as they uncovered more of the remains. It wasn't long before they identified the body. It belonged to a woman named Alice, who had disappeared from the neighborhood years ago. Her husband had reported her missing, but she had never been found, until now. The police questioned Margaret extensively, but she had no answers for them. She had bought the house only a year ago, and the previous owners had never mentioned any hidden horrors within the walls. The discovery only deepened the mystery. and the neighborhood buzzed with rumors and speculation. But for Margaret, the nightmare was far from over. Even after the body was removed and the pipe repaired, the dripping noise continued. It was as if the house itself had absorbed the sound, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Drip, drip, drip. She tried to move on, to reclaim her life and her sanity, but the noise was relentless. It followed her everywhere, growing louder at night when she was alone with her thoughts. Drip, drip, drip. Her sister grew concerned, urging her to seek help. Margaret visited doctors and therapists, but no one could explain the noise. Some suggested it was a psychological manifestation of her trauma, a way for her mind to cope with the discovery of the body. Others hinted at something more sinister, a haunting that would never let her go. Months passed, and Margaret's sanity continued to erode. She stopped sleeping, terrified of the dreams that awaited her. The shadows in her vision grew darker, more defined, and she swore she could see Alice's face among them, her eyes filled with sorrow and accusation. Desperate for answers, Margaret returned to the house one final time. It stood empty, the walls scarred by her frantic search for the source of the dripping. She walked through the silent rooms, the noise growing louder with each step. Drip, drip, drip. In the hallway where she had first discovered the damp wall, she stopped and listened. The noise was deafening now, each drip like a drumbeat in her ears. She felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the truth. The sound wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from within her, a part of her that had been forever changed by what she had found. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The noise was unbearable, a relentless torture that would never end. She screamed, a primal, anguished cry that echoed through the empty house. Drip, drip, drip. As she lay there, broken and defeated, she felt a presence beside her. She looked up and saw Alice standing there, her skeletal form shrouded in darkness. Alice's eyes were hollow, her expression one of eternal sorrow. "Why?" Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "Why won't you leave me alone?" Alice's hand reached out, her fingers cold and clammy against Margaret's skin. "Because," she said, her voice a ghostly whisper, "you are the keeper of my secret, and secrets once uncovered have a way of haunting those who find them." With that, Alice faded into the shadows, leaving Margaret alone with the sound that would never cease. Drip, drip, drip. The police returned to the house, finding it once again abandoned. Margaret's sister had reported her missing and a search was underway. But as the officers walked through the empty rooms, they heard it, the dripping noise that had driven Margaret to the brink of insanity. Drip, drip, drip. One of the officers stopped in the hallway, his flashlight illuminating the scarred walls. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice uneasy. His partner nodded, a frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, but where's it coming from?" They followed the sound, but no matter how hard they searched, they could find no source. The house remained silent and empty, the noise an unsolved mystery. As they left, the sun setting behind them, the dripping noise continued, echoing through the walls of the empty house. And somewhere in the darkness, Margaret watched, her mind forever trapped by the secret she had uncovered. Drip, drip, drip.